Is $1 million a luxury home budget in Northern Virginia? The answer depends entirely on which side of the street you're standing on. In one neighborhood, $1 million might buy you a historic row house near the Old Town Alexandria waterfront. In another, it might buy you a renovated townhouse near the metro in Arlington. Drive a little further out, and that same budget could buy you a detached home with a yard, garage, and a finished basement. And in McLean, $1 million might buy you a project. Same budget, completely different lifestyle. Today, I'm showing you why $1 million behaves like a different currency depending on where you look in Northern Virginia. I'm Brian Block. I'm a longtime Northern Virginia realtor, managing broker, and a former attorney. And one of the biggest mistakes I see buyers make is assuming that $1 million budget should produce a predictable type of house in Northern Virginia. It doesn't. In Northern Virginia, you can drive 15 or 20 minutes and completely change the equation. In some neighborhoods, you're paying for land. In others, you're paying for proximity. Other areas, you're paying for walkability, schools, architectural charm, metro access, or the prestige of a particular address. At $1 million, you can absolutely buy a very nice home. However, you probably cannot buy everything. You're usually choosing 2 out of 3, the house, the location, or the lifestyle. And stay with me because later in this video, I'm going to show you one close-in neighborhood that buyers routinely overlook, even though it can offer dramatically more house and more land than some of the better-known alternatives. For now, let's start with one of the most distinctive lifestyles in Northern Virginia. At about $1 million in Old Town Alexandria, you may be able to buy a historic row house, a townhouse style property, or a larger condo in or near the heart of the neighborhood. But don't come to Old Town Alexandria expecting a huge house. You may be looking at 2 or 3 bedrooms. You might have a smaller kitchen and limited closet space. You may not have a garage. Your outdoor space may be a simple brick patio rather than a large backyard. And depending on the exact block in Old Town, you may have to compromise on renovations. So, why do people pay it? Because in Old Town, the neighborhood becomes part of your home. You can walk out the door and walk to King Street, walk to the waterfront. You can grab coffee, go out to dinner, browse shops, visit the farmer's market, or take an evening walk along the Potomac River. Instead of driving everywhere, your neighborhood becomes an extension of your living room. That's the appeal of Old Town. You're not choosing Old Town because you want the maximum square footage. You're choosing it because you want character, history, walkability, and a place that feels distinctive. Now, older homes can be beautiful. They can also come with quirks. You may have narrow staircases, smaller closets, older systems, uneven floors, or renovation challenges. For the right buyer, those details add personality. And for the wrong buyer, they become daily irritation. What if you like Alexandria, but you want something a little more residential? That's where Delray and Rosemont come into the conversation. At approximately $1 million, you may find a smaller, detached home, an older home with updates, a duplex-style property, or a townhouse, depending on the exact location. In Delray, you're buying neighborhood personality. Mount Vernon Avenue has restaurants, coffee shops, yoga studios, local businesses, community events, and a relaxed atmosphere that feels very different from Old Town. Rosemont is quieter and more residential, but still close to the metro and close to Old Town. You may not get a large house or a brand new kitchen, but you may get a charming home on a tree-lined street with a neighborhood that feels connected. At this price, Alexandria buyers often face a very clear choice. Do you buy a smaller home with walkability and personality? Or do you move a little further south and buy more house, more land, and more breathing room? Take that same $1 million budget south along the George Washington Memorial Parkway. Now the equation changes. In Fort Hunt, Waynewood, Holland Hall, and nearby neighborhoods, $1 million can potentially put you into a detached home with a real yard. You might find split levels, colonials, ramblers, or a home with a finished basement. You might get more storage. In these neighborhoods, you'll find mature trees and quieter residential streets. And you're still relatively close to the Potomac River, the Mount Vernon Trail, Old Town Alexandria, and the Parkway. This is a very different version of Alexandria. You're not walking out your front door to King Street. You're probably getting into your car more often. But you have space for a home office, basement recreation room, visiting family, a dog, a garden, or your children playing in the backyard. Old Town gives you a more walkable, urban, historic lifestyle. Fort Hunt and Waynewood give you a more traditional, suburban house while keeping you close to Alexandria and DC. Neither is absolutely better. They solve different problems. Now let us cross into Arlington. This is where buyers begin to feel the cost of proximity. At the $1 million price, you may be able to buy a renovated townhouse. You may be able to buy a spacious condo with amenities in Roslyn, Courthouse, Clarendon, Ballston, Virginia Square. You may find a smaller or older detached home in parts of South Arlington. However, in many desirable North Arlington neighborhoods, a $1 million detached home is going to involve some serious compromises. It may be smaller, it may need work, and it may sit on a busier street, or it may attract aggressive competition from other buyers. This surprises many people. They think, I have $1 million. Surely I can buy a beautiful single-family home in Arlington. Sometimes you can, but you may need to accept an older home, a renovation project, a less ideal street, or a different part of Arlington than you originally imagined. The money is not disappearing, it is buying location. Arlington gives you faster access to DC, gives you metro access in many of the neighborhoods. And Arlington gives you restaurants, coffee shops, parks, trails, and a more active daily lifestyle. It can also make commuting easier to downtown DC, Pentagon, National Landing, Amazon HQ2, or Reagan National Airport. And that convenience has real value. A buyer who insists on a detached home may feel frustrated by Arlington. The buyer who's open to a high quality condo may find an extremely appealing lifestyle. Now I know we're getting into a lot of geography here. The reason I'm breaking it down like this is that I see buyers lose months of time looking in the wrong neighborhood for their budget. They might continue to wait for the perfect Arlington house to appear, or the beautifully renovated McLean home at a price where it rarely exists. Meanwhile, they may be overlooking an area that's just 15 minutes away that fits their actual lifestyle much better. So let us keep moving. What if you want some of that Arlington convenience without paying the full Arlington premium? That is when Falls Church becomes very interesting. And it's important to understand that Falls Church can mean several different things. There's the city of Falls Church, and then there are Falls Church mailing addresses located in Fairfax County. And these are neighborhoods with very different housing styles, school assignments, price points, and lifestyles. At around $1 million, you may find an older detached home, a townhouse, or a condo, depending on the exact area. In the city of Falls Church, a detached home may be smaller, older, or in need of updating. But you're paying for a central location, a small city atmosphere, restaurants, shops, and access to metro. In the Fairfax County portions of Falls Church, you might find more space and more variety. Lake Barcroft is one example of a neighborhood that feels really distinctive. It has water, mature trees, winding streets, and a more private atmosphere. Nearby Sleepy Hollow can offer wooded lots and an established residential feel. Closer to Mosaic District and Merrifield, buyers may choose newer townhouses or condos for convenience and lower maintenance living. Falls Church is often the compromise location that does not feel like a compromise. You might not get the prestige of a McLean address, you may not get some of the same walkability as Clarendon, and you might not get the same size house that you could buy in Springfield. However, you might get a very functional central location with access to the rest of the region. Now, let's move further south and west into Springfield. This is where buyers often experience a reset. At a $1 million budget, you may be looking at a substantial detached home, probably 4 or 5 bedrooms. You'll likely have a garage. You might have a finished basement. You'll probably have a larger kitchen. You may have a deck, a yard, and enough room to really entertain. Depending on the neighborhood, you may find a home that's updated and move-in ready. Springfield also offers access to the Beltway, I-95, Franconia Springfield Metro, Virginia Railway Express, and commuter routes towards Alexandria, the Pentagon, and Washington, D.C. For many buyers, that suburban rhythm is exactly what they want. You can come home, pull into your garage, spread out, and have enough room for a home office, visiting relatives, exercise equipment, storage, and your daily life. Now the trade-off, you're probably driving more. You may not have the same restaurant scene right outside your door. Your commute is probably longer, especially during peak traffic periods. The overall lifestyle is less urban and less walkable, but the house itself may be dramatically more satisfying. For a buyer who values space and functionality, Springfield can make Arlington feel unnecessarily expensive. For a buyer who wants metro, restaurants, and a shorter commute, Arlington may still be worth every penny. Now, let us talk about the neighborhood that I mentioned earlier. Annandale is one of the most overlooked close-in value plays in Northern Virginia. It's centrally located with access to major roads. Annandale has mature neighborhoods larger trees, and a wide range of housing styles, and in many cases offers more house and more land than buyers expect. At around $1 million, you may be able to buy a detached home on a larger lot with a much more private setting. You may find a colonial, a rambler, a split level, or a renovated older home. You may get a 2, even 3-car garage. You might get a finished basement. Your backyard in Annandale would cost significantly more in Arlington, Falls Church City, or McLean. You might find a street that feels quiet and suburban, even though you're still relatively close to the Beltway, Tysons, Falls Church, Alexandria, and DC. Annandale also has an excellent food scene, including strong Korean and international dining options. Annandale does not always have the same branding power as McLean, Arlington, or Old Town Alexandria. And it's not always the first place that relocation buyers mention. So that can create opportunity. You may be able to buy a home that works exceptionally well for your daily life without paying such a large premium for the neighborhood name. The trade-off is that Annandale is more car dependent. The housing stock is varied. Some homes are beautifully renovated while others need significant updating. The neighborhood feel can change from one street to the next. For the buyer who wants a larger lot, central location, and more value for the money, Annandale deserves some serious attention. Finally, let's talk about McLean. $1 million is a substantial amount of money. But in McLean, it may not buy the house people imagine when they hear the word McLean. At this price of $1 million, you may be looking at a townhouse, a condo, an older detached home, a smaller home, or a property that really needs some renovation. You may occasionally find an opportunity, but a large, beautifully renovated, detached home on a generous lot is generally going to require a more substantial budget. So, what are buyers paying for? In McLean, they're paying for proximity to Tysons, the Beltway, the George Washington Memorial Parkway, DC, and other major employment centers. Buyers may be paying for access to sought-after schools, a quieter suburban setting that still feels close to everything. And yes, some buyers are paying for the address. Nothing wrong with that, but it's important to be honest about it. The question is whether it is worth it for you. So, what does $1 million actually buy you in Northern Virginia? In Old Town Alexandria, it may buy you history, charm, and walkability. In Delray or Rosemont, it may buy you neighborhood personality and a more residential Alexandria lifestyle. In Fort Hunt or Waynewood, it may buy you a detached house, a yard, and a quieter suburban routine. In Arlington, $1 million may buy you location, metro access, and time back in your day. In Falls Church, it may buy you centrality and a balanced compromise. In Springfield, a $1 million budget may buy you significantly more house. In Annandale, this budget may buy you an overlooked value opportunity with land and mature trees. And in McLean, $1 million may buy you access to a premium location, but with real compromises on the house itself. So this is why I always tell buyers, do not begin with the house. Begin with the life you want to live in the house. How often do you commute? How much time do you want to spend driving? Will you actually use a finished basement? How often do you go out to restaurants? Are you comfortable maintaining an older home? Do you want a garage badly enough to move further out? Would you rather own a smaller house in a neighborhood you love or a larger house in a neighborhood that simply works? These are the questions that determine whether a $1 million home feels like a smart decision or an expensive mistake. If you're thinking about buying in Northern Virginia and trying to figure out where your budget fits best, I'd be happy to help you think through these trade-offs. Not simply the listings, and not simply the number of bedrooms, but the commute, the lifestyle, the neighborhood feel, the housing stock, and the long-term fit. The right home is not necessarily the biggest house your money can buy. It's the home that makes your daily life work better. I'm Brian Block of the Block Real Estate Group. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.